What's going on, everybody? C4 here, and today we're continuing the 2018 draft prep by taking a look at my wide receiver rankings 2.0. Now, as I talk, you're probably going to have a little list here of my first round of rankings that I did at week 5 of the college football season. We had Auden Tate at number 10, Christian Kirk at 9, Dante Pettis at 8, Simi Cobbs at 7, Deion Kane at 6, Equanimous St. Brown at 5, Darren Carrington at 4, Courtland Sutton at 3, Calvin Ridley at 2, and James Washington at 1. And a lot has changed throughout the entirety of the season. I don't think, no one had the same squad, I don't think. 5, no, 6, 7, no, everyone's different. I have completely different rankings, top to bottom. I've actually probably spent more tape watching wide receivers than any position so far in my 2.0 rankings. And, you know, like the running backs, there's probably going to have to be a 3.0, a final rankings after the combine, because so much can change. This is a draft class filled with big-bodied wide receivers, and I definitely think that in terms of where I have it so close, I have 4 honorable mentions, just because this is a very, very difficult group to narrow it down to top 10. If any of the honorable mentions have a really good combine, look really good during the drills, and some of these guys that I do have listed in my top 10 struggle, there's going to be, you know, need for change there for me to give my all-out confidence in top 10 for it to stand up with how the players actually eventually start to play in the NFL. But ultimately, I do feel good about this list. And it's one of those things, man, because there's so many guys that didn't make it. Is it a positive or a negative? Is it a positive because there's so much guys that I think could make it? Or is it negative because there's that many projects and I don't necessarily know which guys are going to rise to the top? Well, you know, only time will be able to decide that. So, as we jump into it, we have our 4 honorable mentions. At number 4, we have Jaleel Scott from New Mexico State. He's 6'6", he's 215 pounds, and he is a spectacular catch machine. Really interested to see how he particularly tests at the combine. Honorable mention number 3 is Dante Pettis from Washington. Will definitely day one he will definitely make a roster day one, because I think he will be a special teams weapon. But, you know, it's more so I want to see how well he tests and how well he looks in the drills in particular, because I'm still not 100% sold him as a wide receiver. I originally had him at number 8, but the more and more I watch the other receivers in the class, they look a little bit more refined. But with his ball in his hands, the yards after the catch, he's one of the best in the class. Number 2, we have DJ Moore from Maryland. He was the guy that, you know, originally, I probably went through my top 10 wide receiver ranking list like 3 or 4 times. I had him as high as 7, and the more and more I looked at other guys, I was like, he just found his way out of it. But if he tests really well at the combine, his tape was really good at Maryland, he could definitely pop back up. And number 1 is Jake Winicki from South Dakota State. Baller, man. This guy looks like an absolute baller. Looks like Adam Thielen out there. Another one I want to watch, you know, follow the lines of maybe a Cooper Kupp, who's succeeding really well with the Rams. So definitely want to see more of him at the combine. So those are my 4 honorable mentions that definitely at any point after the combine could work their way in the top 10. But starting at number 10, we have Michael Gallup from Colorado State. 6'1", 200 pounds on the season. He had 100 receptions, 1,400 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Was a Fred Blitnikoff, which is the best wide receiver finalist. Looking at the pluses, he is a great route tree. A lot of, you know, some of these guys come from schemes, more particularly the guys we're going to talk about from Oklahoma State. They come from it, you just run straight. Just run straight from the, just run streaks the whole time. Play like how I play in Madden when I'm drinking. You know what I'm saying? Michael Gallup can run everything. Intermediate routes, short routes, deep routes. It is always a big-time positive to have a guy that can run as many routes as possible, because the learning curve is not as drastic when they make the move to the NFL. He's a physical wide receiver at 6'1", 200. I mean, he's not overly big. That you wouldn't say like, wow, that guy's a power guy, but when he looks at it, when he gets the ball and when he goes through jump balls, kind of reminds you of Anquan Bolden a little bit, where Bolden was like 225, like a thick rip built like a running back. Gallup's not built like that, but he plays that way, and his jump ball is incredibly underrated in comparison to some of these guys that are 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". He's only 6'1", but his jump ball is right up there with some of the best in the class. The negatives is, in general, he's inconsistent. Even though his numbers were big at Colorado State, he would go in stretches and periods of funks where you're just like, man, a guy of this caliber should be making these plays, but he's not. An inconsistency is definitely something a good wide receiver coach can work out of you. And he's one of those guys, I'm holding this as a negative for some of these wide receivers. Combine-based value. How well they test could drastically, maybe not drastically, but could change them 3 or 4 spots in my rankings. The guys that really have that much weighing on the combine versus some of the top-end prospects that really, regardless of how well they test, they are going to go first, second round, be one of the top in the class. That's kind of something I hold against them. But for Gallup, the stats were there, the production was there. I really do think he might have one of the best route trees in this year's draft class. So he's there at number 10, and with a good combine, could rise a little bit. Number 9 is Marcel Aitman from Oklahoma State, 6'4", 220 pounds. On the season, he had 59 catches for 1,156 yards and 8 touchdowns. When you look at him, he is your Chip Kelly rebuild, mouth-drooling pick. Height, weight, speed, it's all there. He's a great deep threat, and he's a pretty solid route runner. From Oklahoma State, they're not required to run, anything crazy in terms of a route tree, but when he does have to run something that's not just a streak, he is fairly effective. The only negative, though, is the route tree. Any of these guys that we're talking about from Oklahoma State, there's another wide receiver, it's limited. You just pick on the Big 12 defenses. They're not particularly great. He's sometimes inconsistent hands as well, body catches and stuff like that. Doesn't necessarily always look comfortable when he's making a catch, but ultimately he's a height, weight, speed guy. He could be maybe not test as fast 40-wise as a Martavis Bryant, but in terms of how he will be used in the NFL, I can definitely see that. I'm not really in the business right now of making pro comparisons because, in my series where I've done reacting to like my 2013, 2012 prospects, I've just been, throwing out big names to make it easier for you guys to kind of make a pro comp. But ultimately, when I'm wrong, it looks horrendous. So I'm trying my best not to really throw out pro comps unless it's, glaring. But I do really like Aitman. I had him in my original Philadelphia Eagles mock draft, and I do think he will be a playmaker in the NFL. Number 8 is Equanimous St. Brown from Notre Dame, 6'5", 205 pounds. On the season, he had 33 catches for 515 yards and 4 TDs. Originally, in my first rankings, he was number 5. The more and more I watched it, the more and more he's a project guy. And while project guys oftentimes have a very, very high ceiling, which he does, you got to kind of base the guys that can probably have more of an impact in their rookie seasons. The guys that are going to give a quicker return to the teams that draft them with the first, second, third round picks. When the St. Brown positives is he's a height and speed guy, definitely not a weight guy. He's built like a pencil. He's like a string bean. Definitely needs to add some weight on that frame, but he has really, really good speed for a guy that's 6'5". The only thing that sucks is that he's simply gonna have to bulk up. And will that speed and explosiveness remain there when he gets on that weight training program? I assume that they'll do their best to keep it there, but it might not. But I think when 40 times comes, he's probably one of the guys that I definitely want to keep an eye on. He has solid route running for a guy that's big. Good feet, quick feet, and I would say there's a chance. I kind of want to say he has the highest ceiling because if he can put it all together with the speed and height that he has, he's going to be a mismatched nightmare. But the negatives, like I said, the thin frame, the project type build. He's definitely a guy that for Philadelphia, we're probably going to be in the market maybe for looking to add another wide receiver. He would be a guy I would absolutely love to gamble on because his ceiling is so high, but just don't maybe expect an immediate return as a rookie. Going to wide receiver number 7, we have Auden Tate from Florida State, 6'5", 225 pounds, 40 catches for 550 yards and 10 TDs. Obviously, kind of like St. Brown at Notre Dame, questionable quarterback. But that mold, that pro comp, and it's easy to make. The Carolina Panthers probably are already like, we're drafting him. He's number 1 on our draft board. We want to get this guy. But yeah, man, red zone threat, physical receiver with pretty terrible quarterback play from Blackman. He made a bunch of big-time contested throws, jump ball. He's incredibly physical, man. This guy's a violent catcher. The negatives, though, is speed. He's a project-type player with speed. His separation usually comes with when his speed's a negative. And he's another guy that a lot of his value is going to be based off his combine grade. If he can run in the low 4.5s, I mean, he might rise a little bit because a guy like that size and that kind of mentality, sign me up. That's the type of wide receiver I like. But if he runs a 4.6, something like that, I think Funchess didn't run particularly well. Or even Kelvin Benjamin because of that size. They're pretty much like a tight end. It could certainly hurt his draft stock. So he's a guy that is combine dependent a little bit, which is why I have to have him at number 7 right now. But if he tests very, very well, he definitely could rise up because I really do like him as a prospect. Going to number 6, James Washington from Oklahoma State, 6'1", 205 pounds. On the season, 74 catches, 1,550 yards, 13 TDs. Was the Fred Biletnikoff winner, which is the best wide receiver in college. Originally, I had him at number 1 in my first rankings, but the more and more I watched it, the more and more I was like, he's Will Fuller. He is a Will Fuller in the NFL, and Will Fuller, that's still good. James Washington could still very well be a wide receiver 1, but when you look at it, he's ultimately a deep threat with good hands. He has good speed. He's not one of those guys that I wouldn't bet on him to win the 40 time or have the fastest 40 time for a wide receiver. But if you're looking just straight up for a deep threat, yes, he will be worth that investment. If you need that dimension to your offense, you have your intermediate, you have your slot guy already established, and the only thing missing from your offense is a deep threat. James Washington certainly ticks off all the boxes that you want to succeed in your offense and could definitely be first to second round value. But when you look at it, he's from Oklahoma State, very much like Marcel Aitman we talked about. Limited route tree. His initial burst is not really that good for a deep threat. It takes him a while to get to his top speed, but then he can take off and really just run like a damn deer. But when you look at him, he is somewhat limited, which is why ultimately I had to knock him down to number 6. If he's what you're looking for, he is going to be very good. But if he's a guy that you want to develop as a straight-up wide receiver one that can do everything and develop into that type of guy, there's probably some better options for you to look at in this draft. But ultimately, I am still a fan. I definitely, like I said, even though he's number 6, I think if you're a team that needs that guy that can get separation downfield and can spread out the field, kind of like what, I guess for an Eagle fan, Deshaun Jackson did for the Eagles, he will be worth that investment for you. But again, there are teams like, for example, the Bears that really just need a complete wide receiver. He's not that guy. Going to wide receiver number 5, we have Simmie Cobbs Jr. from Indiana, 6'4", 220 pounds, 72 catches on the year, 840 yards, 8 TDs. And like some of the other names like Tate and St. Brown, had some questionable quarterback play at Indiana. But I will say right now, out of all these wide receivers, Simmie Cobbs' tape against Ohio State was the best out of anyone in the class. Sure, it's only one game. It's, I'm not trying to put too much stock into it, but he really does look like a mini Mike Evans. And Mike Evans is one of my favorite wide receivers in the NFL. I've made it clear on the channel a bunch of times, but I mean, Simmie Cobbs, jump ball specialist. He has really, really good hands, physical wide receiver. But the only real negative I could have for him is the speed. He's combine dependent. If he has a slow 40 time, he could very well slip into like the late 2nd, 3rd round, somewhere like that, if he tests very, very well, which he might. I mean, the speed does not really jump out on tape. He's more so able to get separation because he's physical at the line of scrimmage, and he's physical once the ball's in the air. If he can run really good, man, he has all the tools to be that Mike Evans caliber wide receiver. And we've seen what Mike Evans has been able to do in Tampa Bay with Jameis Winston. And I'm just a big fan for Simmie Cobbs. This is a little bit of a homer pick just because I've been on the Simmie Cobbs hype train since that Ohio State game. I mean, nothing really screams that he's gonna suck. I would say he has a relatively high floor. I think what you're getting here might be, because of the high floor, he might not have the most upside, he might not have the highest ceiling, but I think what you're going to get in Simmie Cobbs, I want to say worst case, is a guy that is a capable wide receiver 2, and best case, he could be that wide receiver 1, that freak, big, gigantic, physical outside wide receiver. Going to number 4, it's going to be Courtland Sutton from SMU, 6'4", 215 pounds on the season, 68 catches for 1,085 yards, 12 touchdowns. Looking at Courtland Sutton, what you got to talk about? In my original rankings, he was at 3. He dropped down 1 spot. First positives, size. He has tremendous size. He has very good hands. Lots of just wow catches. We're in the Madden terms. Lots of spectacular catches that he made. He's actually pretty capable in terms of run blocking, which is definitely something that you want from your bigger wide receivers. And he has a whole bunch of upside. I definitely think that he has potential to be a wide receiver 1. And in this year's draft class, there's not a whole lot of guys that have wide receiver 1. I think some of these guys are more gimmicky, have their own defined role versus a guy that can do it all. And I definitely think Sutton eventually could be the guy that does it all. But the negatives is I do think he's a project type player. And when you look at him, you can definitely say that the level of competition at SMU wasn't so high. But I mean, a lot of people did say that about Corey Davis. And even though Corey Davis was injured and took a little bit while to get it going, I think ultimately Corey Davis has shown flashes that he is going to be a very dominant wide receiver in the NFL versus, say, Mike Evans or Mike Williams or John Ross, who didn't really do a whole lot as a rookie. But he's another one of these guys, Sutton, very much like Simmie Cobbs, Auden Tate, these big wide receivers. They are combine dependent. If Courtland Sutton runs a slow 40 time, he could slip into that Laquan Treadwell, Mike Williams kind of negatives where everyone's just like, well, he doesn't have the separation speed, and he kind of showed it with his out of pad straight line speed that I'm a little bit worried about. And because of that, because there is that project tag, that's why I had to put him at number 4, because I think the top 3 guys will be able to, regardless of where they go, how well they test, they can make impacts day 1 as a rookie on their team. Versus a guy like Courtland Sutton, who, looking at the other guys that I have ahead of him, you might say Courtland Sutton has the highest ceiling to be that outside wide receiver, but because of the project 10, he's a little bit more of a project than the other 3. I have him out here at 4, but I'm a big fan of him, and like I said, man, the wide receiver rankings were probably the hardest because there's really one guy that I think is like the consensus number 1, and everyone else it's kind of a logjam. So I definitely think there could be a big time shuffling of these rankings after the combine. But for now, Sutton is there at number 4. Going to number 3 is going to be Anthony Miller from Memphis, 5'11", 190 pounds on the season, and 96 catches for 1,462 yards and 18 touchdowns. When you look at Anthony Miller, he has tremendous route running, he has spectacular hands, and he's a very, very good athlete. In reality, he looks like a mini AB. Antonio Brown. Obviously, the negatives are his size, 5'11", 190. He might kind of get put into a box like Antonio Brown did originally when he's coming out of Central Michigan. Always a slot wide receiver. But I think with his athletic ability, he could definitely bounce to the outside. Obviously, you're not going to have him win a lot of jump balls. It's going to be more so him just beating his man down deep, getting wide open, or ultimately just, with his agility, just burning him and making him bite on a route. And kind of like Courtland Sutton, the negative for Anthony Miller is the level of competition. Sure, Memphis hasn't played a whole lot of good teams, but I mean, his game against UCLA was simply spectacular. When they played UCF in the bowl game, he was on fire. Those are probably the 2 toughest games they had all season long, and he absolutely balled out in those games. Riley Ferguson's a very capable quarterback who I think probably will land on a roster somewhere as a developmental guy. But I do think when you look at Anthony Miller, it's so hard not to just see Antonio Brown there. And obviously a little bit comes into level competition. I mean, is this a guy that can only look like Antonio Brown against a lot of guys that aren't going to play at the next level? And then when he actually gets to the NFL, it's going to be a big reality check, kind of like maybe Zay Jones, where it's a little bit rough for him in Buffalo. But when I look at Anthony Miller, man, I think with all the positives, I think regardless of where he goes, he can start as a slot guy, he will make an impact day one as a rookie, which is why I have him as a value. Not as much of a project as, say, Courtland Sutton. Going to wide receiver number 2, we have Christian Kirk from Texas A&M. Originally, I had him at number 9 in my first rankings, but the more I look at it, man, I think he's safe. I think he's going to be one of the safer prospects, and I'm going with the safe guys first with high ceilings versus the guys that might not be as safe with maybe a little bit higher ceiling. For Christian Kirk, he's 5'11", 200 pounds on the season, 71 catches, 920 yards, and 10 TDs. And like a bunch of wide receivers we've seen here where their stats aren't great, they've had some suspect quarterback play. But when you look at Christian Kirk, he is a tremendous athlete. There's definitely a chance that he could run the fastest 40 time out of any of these wide receivers. His route running is very nice, and he probably has the best yards after catch out of any running back in this year's draft class. He pretty much looks like a running back when he's out there in terms of his vision and his awareness and his ability to make people miss in open space. The negative for Christian Kirk is that he's not really physical. He's a guy that a lot of people say, like, and try to compare him to Jarvis Landry, but in reality, he's not a guy that likes to look for contact. While he looks good out in space, he's not a guy that wants to try to take his man on going through them. He'd rather try to go around them. And he definitely gets in funks. There's definitely cold periods. It didn't help with his quarterback play, but looking at his 2017 tape, there would be times where he'd have like 2 or 3 drops in a row. Like a positive trait of a really good wide receiver is being able to get to those funks instantly, whereas him, it might take a little bit more time. But ultimately, when you look at Christian Kirk, with his speed, he could probably play on the outside, and with his yards after the catch ability, he could play on the inside. Either way, I think he makes an impact as a rookie, and you definitely get a lot of bang for your buck here in Christian Kirk. Plus, you get really good return ability. He could start as a special teamer day one. Going to wide receiver number 1, though, he's pretty much the undisputed guy, and that is Calvin Ridley from Alabama, 6'1", 190 pounds on the season, 55 catches for 967 yards and 4 touchdowns. Look at the pros of Calvin Ridley. He is really, really crisp route running. He's a great athlete, and I do think, unlike maybe necessarily Christian Kirk and Anthony Miller, while he's not the biggest guy, at 90 pounds, he's a little bit smaller, and like people are saying he's probably more so like he might weigh in at like the 180s, and because of that, that's definitely something that goes, is that going to hold up in the NFL? Are you going to be able to get some separation with the physical corners that you're going to come out and play? Like Xavier Rhodes will probably just knock him on his ass if they ever put him in press coverage. But that is definitely something that, like, when I see weight and size for a guy that's 6'1", he's not like he's 5'8", 180, and it's just like, his frame's just not able to hold on to that. He's 6'1", so if he gets on a proper strength and conditioning program in the NFL, that's not really that big of an issue, as long as they make sure that he can maintain the weight and be able to keep up with his size and his speed and his agility. But ultimately, I definitely think Calvin Ridley, when all said and done, is the safest wide receiver prospect in this year's draft class. For what? Ultimately, it's a gamble. I think that this is not a safe wide receiver draft class. I think there's lots of booms or busts within this class, but ultimately, the safest guy is Calvin Ridley. And if you're a team, maybe like the Chicago Bears, that desperately need that help on the outside, I think Ridley has to be your pick. So there you go, guys. Those are my wide receiver rankings 2.0. Like I stated at the top, probably got to revisit this after the combine with some shuffling. Let me know what you thought about my list in the comment section below. Did I sleep on anyone? Did I miss anyone? Did I overvalue anyone? Let me know. I'm sure you will. As always, if it's your first time stopping by, don't be afraid. Hit the subscribe button. This is the channel that you want to be staying tuned for when the draft comes in, because we're going to be talking about all positions, all mock drafts, all that good stuff. Smash the like button if you enjoyed, and until next time, it's C4 saying peace out.